Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Scott Silverman, co-founder of Commerce Next, a community event series and conference for marketers at retail and D2C brands. And on behalf of my founders, Veronica Sansev and Alan Dick, I'd like to welcome you to our weekly webinar. Today, we're going to be looking at personalized engagement, how to stop frustrating your customers. And today, we're going to look at new consumer engagement research and hear from a panel of retailers on how they're managing engagement in the midst of constantly changing customer expectations. As always, we'll be taking your questions, so feel free to bring those up during the presentation. Thank you all for tuning in and making the time to join live or listening to the replay. I want to start with a couple important thank yous. First, most importantly, to our speakers today, and we'll be hearing from in a little bit. John Yesko, Senior Director, Head of User Experience and Service Design at Walgreens. Jeff Gerstel, CMO at B&H Photo Video. Jenna Posner, VP of Digital at SNIPES. And Ehren Maedge, GM North America at MoEngage. And we really recognize how busy you all are as speakers, and we want to thank you for taking the time to be a part of this through the prep and sharing your insights with our community. As a thank you, you're going to be getting a gift with compliments of Gift Now. And also 5 lucky attendees will be getting a gift that we'll select randomly at the end of this webinar. And unfortunately, it's just for those who are listening live. And finally, I want to give a big thank you to MoEngage, which is a consumer engagement platform. Thank you for sponsoring today's webinar. We really could not bring these to our audience without the support of our sponsors. It's been a pleasure working with the MoEngage team, with Ehren and his colleagues on this webinar, and especially them bringing new research for our community on like this consumer engagement survey that Ehren's going to be sharing in a little bit. So today's agenda, there's a couple of things. First, we're going to be having Ehren give a presentation on the consumer engagement research and talking about some best practices for personalized engagement. And then we'll turn the cameras on for our panel and have a panel discussion where audience Q&A will be part of that as well. And then we'll also, before doing the panel Q&A, we'll be doing some polling questions and asking our audience their opinion on some of the different topics that we'll be covering today. So a couple of things that are coming up next. Our next webinar, we're taking off next week for 4th of July, and we'll be back on Wednesday, July 14th, looking at adapting advertising strategies to meet growing privacy needs. And that features retailers, executives from Tailored Brands, GoodRx, American Giant, and RTB House. My fellow co-founder, Veronica Sansev, will be moderating that. If you have ever missed any past events or you're looking for some great content on e-commerce and digital retail, I encourage you to check out the Commerce Next YouTube channel. You can see all of the past webinars, summit sessions. We have our Conversations with Commerce Next interviews with industry leaders. I always offer the pro tip, watch it at 1.5 speed and save yourself some time. And I want to remind everybody about our new podcast, Conversations with Commerce Next. Episode 2 is live. It is an interview with Universal Standard co-founder Alex Waldman. She talks about joy as a career strategy. It was a lot of fun talking with Alex. And if you're going on vacation and you want something to listen to in the car, please check it out. And the last thing I want to remind people is we are super excited about getting our community together back in person with Commerce Next IRL, in real life, September 28th and 29th in New York. You can see some of the speakers that have been added. We continue to add speakers almost on a daily basis. We are getting a great response from our community, from speakers, from sponsors. Clearly, there's a lot of pent-up demand. We're really looking forward to getting everyone together. So just a couple housekeeping notes. Don't worry about missing anything. We're recording the webinar and it'll be available as a replay by tomorrow afternoon. And I just want to show you a couple of things on your screen so you can make the most of our webinar. So first, the whole console for Big Marker is on the upper right where you can see chat and Q&A. If you go into the chat area, you can make comments, give high fives to the speakers, offer any suggestions. Just ask everybody to keep it polite. And if you want to ask questions of the speakers at any point, really, there's the Q&A tab, again, on that upper right. You can go and enter the question down on the bottom. If you see other people that are asking questions, there is a feature to upvote those, and that allows us to prioritize and see which questions are most popular with our audience. So with that, housekeeping out of the way, those introductions out of the way, really excited to bring onto our virtual stage Ehren Maedge from MoEngage, who is going to be sharing some research and some best practices. So I'll let you take it from here, and then we'll have you back on the panel, Ehren.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. I know that you said that you've got some folks watching some of your videos in 1.5 speed. I think sometimes I talk at 1.5 speed, so this should work out really well. So looking forward to it. But yeah, definitely great to be with everybody. Hope everybody's having an awesome Wednesday. Wanted to bring some research to you today, along with some other insights that we've got. Again, just slide here kind of tells a whole story, but really just types of messages people are engaging with, what they want, what are their expectations of brands, and ultimately, what are their indications of future shopping behavior. So we'll dig into the details here in just a bit. So just to give you guys a little bit of context on MoEngage, we're a customer engagement platform. And really what that means is we work with brands to help them analyze their customer behavior, segment those customers into groups, ultimately engage them through things like email, mobile notifications, SMS, etc., personalize those messages, and then obviously continue that loop by automatically optimizing on an ongoing basis. So again, that's why we have a big interest in how do we personalize and help our customers personalize their messaging and engage customers in creative ways. One of the other things too that we're big proponents of is really creating this 360-degree view of your customer. And it's not just what I call traditional CRM, which is just first name, last name, mailing address, phone number, that kind of thing. It's also behavior, right? How are they engaging with your brand? How are these consumers engaging with your brand across digital channels? What products are they browsing? What have they purchased? What are they looking at in store? What are they doing, right? All these different touch points, bringing all these things together in a single customer view allows you to do a lot of cool stuff that we'll talk about. All right, so let's get to the research. So just to point out, in the lower corner here, there's a QR code. So if you point your phone camera at that QR code, it's not going to be a menu. I know we're all kind of used to, as Jeff was saying earlier, we're all used to menus now in the age of COVID being available this way, but it is a link to download a report. So please, if you want to see a lot more detail here, please download the report, and we'll have a bunch of different insights to share. The survey we did was really across 1,000 consumers, and you can see here, across US, Canada, UK, and Germany, and that's where this data is coming from. All right, so let's talk about what kinds of messages do consumers most want to get to. So no surprise, when I saw this, I kind of thought about Jerry Maguire, right? Show me the money. You've got with the gray and the blue pie slices there, you've got essentially anything related to a sale or a promo or a coupon, and that's over 50% of it. So that wasn't a surprise. But I think what stood out to me was kind of this yellow wedge there, which talks about things like, basically gives consumers a glimpse into your company's culture, right? What are the social things that you're working on? What are the economic or ecological things that you're working on? So certainly there's some aspect to other things outside of just company news and even promos. Now, if we talk about what I would say, just how often, I don't think any of this is a surprise, but one of the things I wanted to point out is the consumers that we interviewed, right? They're just answering this question based on what they feel is the types of message that they want to get. But I think the things that we've seen a lot of is when you start thinking about time of year, obviously frequency is going to change. So, when you're around the holidays, maybe you're communicating daily, with promos and offers. If you've got a seasonal business, right? We work with a golf brand right now, and they're very, very active in the spring and through the summer, but in the winter, maybe it's a monthly email versus like mobile notifications every weekend. So I think it's not only the seasonality of the business, but it's also the channel, right? I don't want to get push notifications every day because those are pretty active and they're in my face and they're interrupting my day-to-day activity. But do I tolerate daily emails from my favorite brand? Yeah, I do. And sometimes I usually just delete them, but I know they're there. So again, some good findings here. I think there's a lot of folks that say email is dead. This survey still says consumers, by far a third of them, are all about email. But I think the other thing this shows, and we see this too with our customers, is that consumers are adopting an increasing amount of channels, right? They want brands to reach them where they are and the channels they'd like to communicate on, right? My daughter's 13 years old. She's a Snapchat user. She wants to have a brand communicate with her that way, right? She doesn't really care about email. So I think that as the generations, more and more generations come into the fold and we've got more and more channels available to us, we've really got to be cognizant of how are we communicating with what people on what channel and making sure that that's part of our personalization strategy. So the other thing we did too in this research is ask any new channels being adopted during the pandemic. So I think this is telling. I don't think it's any surprise, but certainly there are going to be situations where some consumers prefer to engage a brand on multiple platforms. So I think I take myself, for example, right? I would always used to go into Home Depot when the pandemic came around. I'm like, you know what? I'll try the curbside pickup. And I did that, I think, for a picnic table and also like a thing of caulk, right? I mean, full spectrum of products. So I ended up downloading the mobile app, started using that more. I think I ended up transacting on the web, but actually doing orchestrating the pickup itself on mobile. And then of course on emails where I got like confirmations. So it was really touching like 3 different channels in that experience. So again, with COVID, I think there's a large adoption, but it's not like any one of them has to be turned off. I think everybody's adopting multiple channels. Okay, so let's talk about expectations. So when I saw these results, I wasn't too surprised. I think the first name thing surprised me how important that is to people. I do get a lot of emails that say, hey there, instead of my first name. But that is something right now, if you look at personalization, name it seems like an easy win. I will say though that big slice there, the blue, based on my previous purchase history, 26%. I wanted to actually use an example. I know Jeff here from B&H. I purchased a Mac Mini from B&H about a year ago. And in that example, being able to get emails like 2 months after, like, hey, why don't you protect your Mac Mini with McAfee security? Or, hey, why don't you sign up for Backblaze remote backup? All those types of relevant information and even offers that are related to my purchase history is a big deal to consumers. So I definitely encourage everybody to think about how could we deliver that type of content, those type of offers on this continuum based on what people purchase. Alrighty, so we all know that customer experience can make or break a brand, especially in this day and age where just the tiniest bit of friction can kind of kick people off. There are a lot of alternatives, and ultimately, what frustrates people, right? So I think that you can all see the results here. Ultimately, the big one is one that I actually see banks doing a lot, just because they're kind of old school in the technology that they use, and they've got these multiple lines of business. I'm sure all of us have experienced, getting a different colored logo from one line of the branch of the bank versus a different line that maybe does the mortgages. I mean, I've got like a checking account, a mortgage, and like an auto loan with the same bank, and it seems like the communications I get are different. So clearly that's an indicator that is very, very frustrating to consumers. So when you're thinking about the channel you're communicating on, how can you make sure that that's very, very consistent? And it's challenging, but it's clearly something that's that's highly valued by consumers. And then ultimately, during COVID, there were a lot of new changes that were made. I think the big takeaway for me from this graph is nobody is going to be going back necessarily to the way things were. They still want all the things. There's some people that will, there's some people that won't. Ultimately, guess what? As brands, we still need to make sure that we're offering all the available options. I mean, consumers want more options, not less. And I think this graph just demonstrates that. Okay, so those are the survey results. I think now we're talking about how do we deliver this consistent experience, right? We've got a bunch of different ways that we can do that. So a couple things that I wanted to call out here. If you look on the left and the right, you kind of see one of the things that, like number 2, for example, like too many disparate MarTech tools with siloed channels to manage, right? Doing that really requires marketers to duplicate efforts and launch and sync campaigns. And it takes a lot of time. So you're talking about really losing the nimbleness that you need to actually get campaigns live. But again, these are some of the challenges that we commonly see. So if there's any way that you can take these challenges head on, I think you're going to find definitely some momentum you'll build within your organization. Other trends that we see too are these right here on the screen. I mean, AI is a big one. We see a lot of customers that are trying to augment their experts that they have in-house. They know about where to aim the arrow, but AI is really allowing them to really nail the bullseye. So ultimately, I think again, all of these I think will make sense to everybody, but I definitely want to call out AI as something that we're seeing a lot of use on and a lot of requests for. All righty, so let's talk about best practices. This is based on our experience. So you've heard me talk a lot about kind of that single view of the customer. Ultimately, unifying your customer data across channels is a huge key, right? So I don't think anybody disagrees with that. I know how you get there is hard in some cases, but implementing a tool like a customer data platform or a CDP can definitely help you get there. So getting that single view of the customer, what are they doing? How are they engaging? Who are they? That is really going to help you as you move down this path to greater personalization and greater engagement. Tip number 2 is really acting on the data by analyzing your user paths. So we've got this concept we think about user path analysis, right? It's what's that user journey? What are those different points at which they engage with you as a brand, whether that be online or in store? And how do you start bringing in all those data points so you can kind of see that user journey? And when you do that, right, it's kind of like you're a fly on the wall, kind of watching what happens. And then you can take that another dimension and say like, okay, let me look at my most loyal customers, right? Let me start looking at the people that just crossed that 90-day mark where they haven't made a purchase, and prior to that, they were making one every 60 days, right? What are those people doing or not doing that's leading to this behavior? So I'd certainly encourage everybody to start looking kind of at this, mapping out that customer journey in whatever analytics tools you can. The other thing too is we're big fans of RFM, right? And using this to be a dynamic model because it helps brands take a step back and really look at essentially what could be an overwhelming amount of data and look at it with a little bit more, roughing in some boundaries, some guardrails, right? Because right now, when you could start anywhere, why not start somewhere and say like, okay, well, what group should we focus on? So ultimately, the RFM model can really help you categorize loyal, lost, hibernating, people that need attention. And then essentially you can drill into these groups and try to discover, like using user path analysis, okay, what are these champions doing that makes them a champion? Or what are the folks that we just lost? What are they doing that makes them lost? So I think all of that can be helpful. The other thing too is using dynamically personalized content in your campaigns. That's one of the things that really help you kind of create that one-to-one engagement with your end user. And I mean, again, if you look at the research, that's what people are looking to do. It's not only, hey, can you customize the content based on my previous purchase history or even my name, maybe even where I live, but also too, bringing in things like A/B testing, being able to auto-optimize using AI on what's that best customized message. And ultimately, at the end of the day, this comes down to, giving the message to the individual that's most relevant for them. Again, I think I always tell folks, relevancy equals success, right? If you can get something more relevant, you're going to be more successful. All right. So final slide here. This is a big one, but I think that, you know, what this kind of tries to do is show kind of this engagement across the life cycle. And there's a lot going on here, so let me kind of break this down for you. So we all know that consumers nowadays are more connected than ever before, right? So they might interact with you and your brand across digital channels, you know, mobile app, website, social media, as well as to step into physical stores, check prices, share purchases, request coupons, etc. I mean, all of this makes the purchase process pretty complicated. So the aim of this customer lifecycle model is just to show an idea where you could keep delivering value and creating that consistent brand experience all throughout the life cycle, kind of using the best engagement channels for each phase. So you can see the 4 phases at the top: reach, act, convert, and engage. And at each phase of the cycle, you can approach the consumer using specific channels and specific marketing messages. So for example, the reach stage, where the prospects are gaining awareness, it might be where you focus more marketing efforts on like direct mail or SEO, content marketing, and other demand gen activities. Where, like, you know, first purchase, where you kind of got that act phase, you're doing more things like to talk about related products or even acquire additional ways to engage with them. So you're creating that kind of omni-channel connection. So, you know, in other words, customer lifecycle marketing can really help you navigate the challenge of this complex customer journey. And using this holistic strategy, getting this kind of single view of the customer, will really enable you to connect with your users across all these different touch points, and really to win new customers, you know, engage and re-engage existing ones, and bring back anybody who's kind of dropped away or fallen away from the brand. So again, please, thank you for all that, and I hope that was helpful. I mean, please check out the personalization report for more details. And yeah, thank you very much for your time. And you can always reach out to me. I think is my email down here? Yeah, you can shoot me an email right there if anybody has any questions about some of the things we're seeing, trends we're seeing, and things we're doing with others. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ehren. Always great to be presenting consumer research, merchant research for our community. And this whole idea of consumer engagement is so important right now, especially with all the new customers that have been coming into e-commerce during the pandemic. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation with our panel in a little bit. But first, we want to get a little bit of a sense of where everybody is on the call in terms of what they're doing for personalized engagement. So I'm going to go through a few questions here. We'll see what everyone is thinking. The first is, how would you describe your ability to personalize based on channel and frequency preferences of customers? So this is kind of understanding, you know, how often they want to hear from you, what channel they want to hear from you, versus the message or the product. So let's see how everybody is feeling that they're doing in that area of personalizing based on channel and frequency. And here we're seeing that it's average or below average. So it seems like everyone on the call is feeling like there's a fair amount of work to do in this area. So we'll go on to I'm going to close this one and we'll go into the next one. How would you describe your customers' expectations for personalized experiences compared to 2 years ago? That was something Ehren talked about, that customers are presumably have higher expectations about what you're using, how you're using the information about them to develop different shopping experiences. So here the choices are arranged between customers are much more demanding or much less demanding, not much has changed, or something in between there. So let's see. So we're seeing that, you know, you're all experiencing what Ehren's consumer research seemed to be saying as well, which is customers are much more demanding. Around 60% of you are saying that, or, you know, and 30% of you are saying that they're somewhat more demanding. So not very many of you think that they're less demanding or it hasn't changed. So next question. How would you describe your visibility into customer behavior across channels? thinking about customers that could be interacting you, email, SMS, store, website. Do you know that customer has gone from one channel to another as part of their journey shopping with you? And how would you describe your visibility into that over the last 2 years? How has it improved or not improved? So good news, it seems that majority of you are seeing improvements in your visibility. And this one I know it's a tough one, especially as just things like, cookies are less prevalent, and it's just hard to track between app and, email and all these others. So glad to see that's improving. And if I were to guess, and we asked if there's still more room for improvement, I think most people would agree that there is. Next question, and we just have 2 more. Have you adapted? Actually, this is our last question. Have you adapted your marketing in response to the growing privacy needs? So, and this could be select all that apply here. Shifted marketing spend to new advertising channels, shifted to retention and loyalty programs, put more efforts towards collecting first-party data or login data, put in place new attribution methods, or nothing, still waiting to see how things play out with all of these, with the growing privacy needs. So this is a very relevant to next week's conversation, or not next week, the July 14th webinar, where we're going to be looking at new advertising in light of these growing privacy needs. So let's see what everyone had to say here. So majority of you, about a third of you, are putting more efforts towards collecting first-party data. We're hearing a lot about that. Some are shifting marketing to new advertising channels, and some are shifting marketing to retention and loyalty programs. So that's certainly, the retention and loyalty programs is very relevant to the panel discussion that we're going to have in a little bit. So speaking of which, I am going to close that out and bring up our panelists for a discussion. All right, welcome, Jenna, Jeff, John. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks,
how are you all doing?
Great, thank you.
Good. I wanted to ask you all kind of to first introduce yourselves, share a bit about your role, your company, what people need to know about it, and then just to help everybody understand where you are, kind of level set, is where are you, your company, in terms of personalizing customer engagement and some of these areas we've been talking about, like email, SMS, mobile apps. Where have you been and where are you now? And why don't we start with Jenna?
Sure. So I'm Jenna Posner. I'm the VP of Digital for SNIPES, responsible for e-commerce, mobile, and customer service in the US market. SNIPES is a global streetwear retailer, so we're akin to a Finish Line or a Foot Locker, brand of brands. We sell all of this, Nike, Jordans, Adi, etc. And we came to the US in early 2019. So Scott, your question about where are we, as it relates to personalization, I don't know how deep you want me to go now, if you want to go around the horn and make intros, or you tell me.
Well, just help, for everyone who's listening in, just so they can understand kind of generally where you are.
Sure.
And some of the, broad strokes of what you're doing.
Sure. So as a mid-market company here in the US, what I will say is that we do have some very unique omni-channel hooks in place, right? So we actually fulfill about 50% of our e-commerce orders from store, which means we have the unique pleasure of understanding and being able to leverage things like inventory position in our stores. So having direct access to store data allows us to get a little dangerous. I would say we're a little nascent in actually putting that omni-channel data to work as it relates to personalization, but we've got a very clear and aggressive path, some recent case studies, and some wins that have really given us the confidence to invest and go deeper.
All right, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff Gerstel. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of B&H Photo. We're a primarily online retailer of photography, video, audio, and consumer electronics, with one large store in New York, and then the rest online via both B2B and B2C. My role is on marketing, but mostly the consumer side of our business, focusing on satisfying our customers throughout the journey. I loved in Ehren's presentation his tip 5, and so in terms of where we are in the journey, there's many of the things on his chart we're active in, some more so than others. I guess we have one happy customer with Mac Minis, which was nice to hear.
That's
right. And I think the thing that you said, Ehren, that really stuck out to me was around relevancy. So sort of knowing who your customers are and offering them interactions that'll be valuable to them. So I'd say, if I was filling out your first question, I would say we're somewhere in the average to below average on that path.
All right. And last but not least, John. So I'm assuming most people know who Walgreens is, but let us know a little bit about your role and kind of where you are on this customer engagement journey.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to be here. I don't have a wall of drugs behind me, unfortunately. But yeah, as Scott said, I think Walgreens is fairly ubiquitous. We're a 9,000 store pharmacy in the U.S. We kind of think of our business in two different areas, because we are a retailer in terms of kind of being a convenience store and health and wellness over-the-counter provider. But at its core, the company is a pharmacy, right? So in the pharmacy and health space, of course, most of our interactions are uber personalized already, because we're talking about people's healthcare and their prescriptions and their health information. On the retail side, I would say we're really kind of just getting started in terms of personalization. A lot of that happens in the space of kind of merchandising and offers and things like that. So kind of two different answers depending on what part of the business you think of. And lately also, particularly in our mobile app, we've been starting to dip our toes in with something that's maybe somewhere in between those two businesses, which is health-related content that's relevant and personalized, which on one hand, we're hoping leads to just stronger engagement with our digital properties, but also, of course, leads ultimately to more sales at some point.
All right, great. Well,
I'm sorry, I didn't mention my role. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Right,
that was the easiest part of the question. I head up user experience and service design. So I've got a team of about 60 folks that are focused on the experience, mostly on digital in our mobile app and website, but also we get involved through our service design team in kind of the end-to-end holistic customer experience, which for us often starts in digital but ends in the store. So that end-to-end experience is super important.
So one of the things that Ehren talked about in the research was this increasing expectations among consumers that the retailers and brands they're shopping with, who they have this expectation that they should know about their past purchases, their interests, all these other things about them that consumers know are being collected about them, and are expecting this to translate into better, more relevant shopping experiences, or just more relevant engagement for them. So I'd be interested to hear you each talk about how you're experiencing that or feeling that from your own customers, or in any anecdotes you can share that have really been that have highlighted this particular issue, to help everybody understand what the consumer mindset is right now, and if you've seen any big shifts with that. So maybe Jeff, we'll start with you.
Well, I guess what I was thinking of as you're asking the question is, we're constantly talking to our customers via post engagement surveys, and I don't know, I seem to read a lot of them and seeing what's making people tick, and I think over the past year, if you asked me a year ago, it almost seemed like we threw all the rules out the window. And customers were happy a year ago if we simply shipped their order and they received it. So now, it's back to reality, and we have many customers who are new to e-commerce. And again, I wrote one line down that Ehren said, which I thought was great. Delivering a consistent, relevant, and well-timed experience is critical, and consumers expect it. So I almost think like the key right now is don't get too fancy. For us, it tends to be about a very old school experience with someone available by phone or by chat or by email who can help give you advice, guidance, and assistance. And what I'm seeing in these surveys is a constant appreciation of that personal connection and frustration when it's difficult to find that. So I almost like, my reaction to your question is almost keep it simple. And Ehren shared this slide about key trends driving personalized retail experiences. The thing that struck me is, you got to master the basics. So, what's your service expectation? If someone bought a camera, do they really want to hear about a ukulele? Maybe, but probably less likely. So I'm just trying to focus on keep it simple, really double down on the things we do well, recognizing that we saw a large influx of new customers over the past year. The hope is that they'll move from being a new trial customer into a repeat customer. And I think the key to that is to do what we do well. And for those whom that resonates with, great. For those who not, what can we do? But really just kind of keep it simple and master those basics before you get too complicated.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of looking at it, and it's you could see where a brand may strive for, like, I want to wow my customers with how much I know about them and really surprise them with some suggestion. And what I think I'm hearing you say is just keep it frictionless and make it feel that they're just getting the right thing, and don't make any mistakes. Don't do anything dopey like showing them a ukulele when they've been buying cameras.
Yeah, I mean, we've had such a year of screwing up so many things that I think there's a tremendous tolerance for a long time. And in our business, if you buy an expensive camera, for example, you're probably in the market for a high quality lens to match it. So it's very difficult to know which lens to pick. So how can we help them make the right decision? And unfortunately, it's not a simple situation that there's one right decision. It's the right decision is different for in 50 different situations. So it's how do we connect with really what they're looking for and give them information that's relevant and useful to them.
And John, I mean, you have an interesting perspective, leading UX at Walgreens, where you're, I would imagine, in your role studying customer behavior, every day, kind of living and breathing it with your team. What are you noticing? And are there any striking things about customer expectations? And anything you want to either comment on what Jeff was saying or your own observations?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us right now is thinking about that omni-channel experience. So, as I mentioned in the setup, we have a lot of customer journeys that start in digital and they end in the store. So people are refilling prescriptions in the app and they're picking up at the store, or they're researching retail products, pricing, or clipping a digital coupon or something and then showing up in the store ultimately to finish that transaction. So trying to really pay attention to that as one experience is super important for us. And I think, we've been, as a 100-plus-year-old company, maybe have a reputation of being a little slower on the digital kind of conversion or the digital transformation, even though we've been doing it for a while. I think with the last year, we've had an opportunity to reach some new customers that are new to digital, not necessarily new to Walgreens, but new to digital, whether it was through our pickup program or other things. So I think what the challenge for us now is how do we take, I hesitate to call it momentum because it was due to COVID, but how do we take some of these new behaviors and some of the ways that we've been able to kind of redefine some of the convenience aspects of our service and kind of extend that and make that part of the norm rather than something that customers did during COVID because they kind of had to. So it'll be really interesting to see like how that sort of forced adaptation that our customers have gone through becomes part of their normal lives versus them sort of going back to their pre-pandemic way of doing things with us.
So you mentioned omni-channel, and I wanted to turn to Jenna and draw her into this conversation as well. And Jenna, in our conversation earlier this week, you were talking about a new program, the e-receipts that you've rolled out, and how that's been contributing to a lot of these omni-channel, your ability to manage omni-channel behavior and insights, and how you've been really pleased with this program. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I definitely can. I think, during the pandemic, we all know that we were put in a slingshot, right? We were forced to address the mechanics of some of these challenges. And whether it was driven by customer expectation or it was driven by a need to survive, right? As a retail organization, we had to find ways to give our physical stores digital voices. And so, the result of that, which is what we've kind of been trying to do over the past 5 to 10 years, is we've been able to successfully create that hybrid consumer, right? That omni-channel consumer that is now shopping in store and shopping in line. And I think the challenge throughout the pandemic in dealing with things like curbside, and I'll get into e-receipt, but curbside and contactless payment and BOPIS and all of these kind of omni-channel initiatives that we've brought to market over the last year, that would have historically taken us 5, has taken us 6 months, right, to kind of catch up. We want to bet it backwards, right? We kind of built the mechanics first in order to enable the transaction to take place and serve the consumer, but we kind of didn't leverage the data and all of that. And so I think what a lot of retailers are really doing right now is they're refining these mechanics that they put in place, and they're saying, okay, now we've got this data, right? Now we have this omni-channel data. How can we bring this brand voice forward? How can we take this to the next level? How can we allow a consumer to digitally shop a store, right? How can we drive better utilization of these tech investments that we've made? And so I'll kind of daisy chain that sentiment into what we did with e-receipts, right? I say e-receipts and I chuckle a bit because, this is so, I don't know, so 2000, right? It's just, it feels like it's been around forever. But I think what's typically happened for a lot of retailers is when they're looking at their point of sale, they're looking at their point of sale data. That data goes into the good old CRM, right? It gets dumped right in. Yeah, Ehren, I'm just teeing you up for this right now. It gets dumped into the CRM, and I kind of tease and I say, yeah, that's where data goes to die, right? Data goes to die in a CRM. It's not designed to come out. It's not designed to pump on analytics or insights or drive segmentation or marketing automation. It's there to hold it and play host to it. And so what I saw in e-receipt was an opportunity to test a couple of things. One is, okay, if a customer walks into a store and they agreed to receive an e-receipt, it's an opt-in. It's an enrollment, right? Call this pre-loyalty, right? Call this, it's a program. They're saying, yes, I want to be identified, and I'm willing to give you a piece of my, digital PII in order to make my next experience or my future experience more efficient or more effective. And so we rolled out e-receipt, and we didn't just start and end there. We actually pushed our e-receipt provider, who is MoEngage, to actually build webhooks for us. So we could pull the POS data associated with e-receipts out of POS and put it back to work. My thought was, I don't want all the other junk. Like, I don't want all the other anonymous transaction data. We can look at that big data later. We can analyze it, and we can look at, big picture insights and analytics. But those consumers that are saying, I'm Jenna, here's my email, send me an e-receipt, are low-hanging fruit for us to work on to convert from a store shopper to an e-commerce shopper. And so we have now been siphoning that e-receipt data, order data, into Service Cloud, right? So either appending those consumers to existing records, so we now have a better 360-degree view of who they are across both channels, creating new store-only consumer profiles within Service Cloud if they don't exist today. Pumping them into Cordial, who's our CDP ESP, right, to make sure that they've got as much POS context as they can, and really just democratize that data, allow it to be leveraged across multiple different platforms. And it's been pretty unbelievable. We've seen an unbelievable result as it relates to conversion. And what I'll say I'll call it a really, really light, loyalty tactic or enrollment test. We're doing very little with that data today, right? We're kind of just getting the pipes in place. We're making sure everything's going into the right places before we really action against that data. But we've been monitoring the conversion, and in doing nothing, in doing only creating a digital relationship by delivering an e-receipt to those consumers, we paid for the product in less than 3 months. So the appetite is there, right? But it's creating those conduits to allowing that data to engage those consumers and move forward. And ultimately, our plan will be to, much like Ehren's sentiment is, how do we leverage that data across all of these touch points and use it to make sure that we're communicating with our consumers based on who they are, where they are, and what they're buying. So that has been a really fun test for us. And as I'm sure all of you omnichannel retailers know, coordinating with stores and IT and facilitating that work was also a really good testament to our ability to execute in an omnichannel capacity. So we're pretty psyched about it. And e-receipt was a nice surprise and a nice test to validate our future investments.
So continuing on this thread of omni-channel and kind of understanding behavior of customers across channels, there was a question that came in from Parker Block about, are third-party cookies used to personalize across channels throughout the journey? And if yes, what happens as we see this eventual deprecation of third-party cookies? And Ehren, I saw you had a thought on that. Maybe you could address that to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if you really take a step back, I mean, obviously navigating those waters about what's going to be allowed and what's not is tricky. I mean, it seems like everything is constantly changing, especially with the release of iOS, the most recent, or I think it was iOS 14, right? And all those changes to attribution tracking. But I think for me, I'm always encouraging people, really start thinking about how do you create that, that value where people can authenticate, right? Whether that's log in or share some other kind of, direct contact information, whether it be email or a mobile number. Can you get to that point? I know not everybody's going to go that far, but at least, if you can create an owned channel, as we refer to them as, a way to communicate with people where you own the channel, you've maybe got reasons or points along the way. There are a variety of attribution models that can give you a pretty darn good idea on who's who. And we see that all the time. I mean, it may not be perfect, but again, I think it's a reality right now where we live. It's, privacy is changing. The way the data is captured and held is changing. So all we can do is, again, use AI and use other models to make decisions.
So I wanted to turn back, John, to you. Again, kind of tapping into your UX leadership. And you even recently contributed to a book on UX. We put a link to that in here. But with the idea that good UX leads to engagement, can you talk about how the UX process has evolved for you during the pandemic? Are there new sources of data or observing customers that have been useful to you? And what kind of changes that you've seen in user behavior do you think will be persistent versus more ephemeral?
Yeah, sure. I mean, pandemic's been interesting for us in lots of ways, and one of them has been because we're a big provider of vaccines. So, setting up the whole kind of vaccine scheduling and fulfillment process has been extremely interesting behind the scenes. I would say how it has changed has been that the way the process has changed is the fact that it has changed so much. So as we started to try to prepare for the vaccine rollout, there was a lot of incomplete information for us to work from. So, I mean, those of us in the digital space are kind of used to here's sort of the business goals. Here's the requirements we're going after. Let's go design it and build it. But for us, that process was sort of very forced agile in a way, because we never quite knew what was going to be around the corner in terms of vaccine availability and who would be eligible and things like that. So in that case, our process, I'll call it, in a nice way, I'll call it more organic. Another person might say it was a little more chaotic, just because we had to quickly get things out and everything was very much a rush. And so we, in some ways, probably had to shortcut our process a little bit just to get things out and to kind of keep up with what was happening between distribution and guidelines and eligibility and all these things, right? So, I mean, I understand that certainly none of the other folks on the call probably have had that specific experience in terms of vaccines, but there's probably some lessons there, in that we were all sort of dumped into this thing that we didn't really expect or weren't necessarily prepared for. But what we're trying to then take out of that for our business is, how do we take some of the things we learned about that process and roll it into more of our longer term strategy for how we handle vaccines and other health services. The other piece I'll mention, which I might have alluded to earlier, is that we did get a lot of folks who had previously only dealt with us in sort of the analog world by coming into the stores, that either wanted to or sort of were obligated to use digital. So we need to figure out how we continue to engage those customers and make it worth their while to engage with us across channels, and not just sort of revert to their usual sort of store-centric behaviors.
Thank you. We have time for maybe two more questions. One of them is that I want to cover is another thing that Ehren mentioned about these challenges on delivering consistent experiences, which I think is there's that we've been touching on that throughout the conversation. But these challenges could be relying on IT that is managing a number of different projects. Inaccessible, disconnected data, like Jenna was saying, where CRM systems where data goes to die, inactionable data. So wanted to hear how anything you can share for our audiences listening about a particular challenge that you've had in delivering a consistent experience that you've made some progress on. And Jeff, I'll start with you, because we haven't heard from you in a little bit. And everyone was interested in your headphones, which they're Plantronic, right?
Yeah, I sent a link to Alan. So,
Right.
The first thing I would say is I love Jenna's story about e-receipts, because this isn't exactly cutting edge technology, but it's like such a pragmatic, practical solution that has tremendous benefits. So to me, it's like the challenge is, try and keep it vanilla. Our IT group is very stretched right now. John was talking about UX, and I wanted to put my head down just because how much is on our plate to get done, and all the issues there. So we've done like a lot of work trying to find, baby steps where we can find pieces that don't need a lot of heavy lifting from IT, where we can kind of make hit a bunch of singles versus going for home runs, if you will. And I think we've really been looking into, I would say, what contributes to issues we're trying to solve, and then sort of dissecting what the pieces are. And yeah, maybe there's 10 contributing factors and we can make a difference in 3 or 4, and let's make a difference in those 3 or 4. I kind of, one thing I was thinking just listening was 2 things. One, what are the trends that you're seeing for us in our business that are unique to us, and what can we do about them? So, simple example, there wasn't a lot of travel going on up until recently. So to spend a lot of time and effort communicating about travel photography might not have been the most relevant trend. The other thing is, Jared, we've been looking a lot at solutions we've added over the past couple of years to see where are we not making full utilization of what's available. So it's almost like rather than start a new project with all the challenges there, what are the projects we've gotten done over the past year or two, and is there 10% here or 20% there that we're not using that would be relatively simple to add? So it's sort of like those three things is what's going on in my head and where we've seen some examples. But I'm going to call it e-receipts now. Keep it simple. Pragmatic solutions to complicated problems.
But Jeff, you know what I'll say too about that? The amount of perspective that we've all gained over the past year, and the amount of tech innovation and enhancement that we've gone through, taking a look at those older legacy strategies under this new lens, right? I could have just implemented e-receipt and done nothing with the emails, right? Mm-hmm. But we threw MuleSoft at the end of it to make sure that data was accessible, right? And we laid the groundwork for having our own autonomy as it relates to how we leverage our omni-channel data. And I think 10 years ago when e-receipt probably came out, we weren't thinking that way, right? So a lot of these legacy systems are implemented and running, and they're not a problem, but they very well may represent conduits or opportunities to get access to data, or a more valuable cohort of consumers that are more likely to convert, or et cetera, et cetera. So
exactly.
I'm down with vanilla, but recognizing that we're smarter, we're better now. So let's get the most out of those investments.
Well, I think if anyone takes something away from today's webinar, it's the shiny object is not necessarily the answer here, or it's the pragmatic incremental steps, using what you've already got and making more of it, which I think is great advice for everyone to maybe sit down and think about a little bit. So we are almost at the top of the hour, but I always like to end these looking a little bit towards the future, and asking about what are you planning to do for holiday of 2021 in terms of digital engagement, any new features that you plan to be rolling out. So Jenna, we'll start with you, and again, we have 2 minutes, so we'll just do a quick rapid fire round the horn here.
Sure, we're launching an app next week, so that's going to be the first phase of 3 phases, a commerce-focused app. We just launched an SMS, so that's cranking. It's very new. From a holiday perspective, we anticipate that it's going to kind of start around back to school this year, so we're going to be ready really, really, really early. And like last year, we are likely not going to be promotional for Black Friday or Cyber Monday, because we just don't need to be.
All right, John?
Yeah, we have a different term for holiday season. We call it cold and flu season. So a lot of our focus is going to be around, as I said, sort of getting folks in the door to get all of their flu shots and other vaccines and things like that, and taking care of their health. And I do think also our pickup program will be probably big around the holidays for sort of those last minute purchases and convenience. So continuing to fine tune that process.
And Jeff?
Well, I mean, we're putting all our efforts into getting inventory in stock, filling orders, delivering, and trying to create some happy customers. I think in terms of innovations and improvements, it's mainly incremental this year. Making a bunch of things a little bit better than anything dramatically new.
And Ehren, we'll let you have the last word as our sponsor. Any recommendations looking into the future aside from touch base with you about MoEngage? And you offered some tips, but maybe a bonus tip as everyone looks towards holiday in 2022.
Yeah, no, I just think, I know it seems overly said, but it's all about figure out creative ways you can look at your data and use it, because we're generating so many digital touch points these days. And, it really represents, more and more, it's going to represent reality for the consumers and how they engage. So I just think for me, it's just look at different ways that you can make sense and even make it easy to examine your data and put that to use for you in a variety of ways.
All right. Well, thank you all, for spending some time with our community this afternoon. Really appreciate that. Look for your fun gifts from Gift Now. And we look forward to seeing everybody coming up on July 14th. We have our next webinar, Adapting Advertising Strategies to Meet Growing Privacy Needs. And of course, you can go to commercenext.com and learn about things like our podcasts and our YouTube channel and our in-person event. So thank you all again. Have a great rest of your afternoon, a wonderful holiday weekend and vacations, if those are included as well. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, take care, everybody.
Thank you.